I know that people get this. And what's so interesting is sometimes going through something catastrophic is the thing that actually wakes us up. And that's why I think storytelling is so important, right? Because we hear a story like this with Diana, and then all of a sudden, what do we start doing? We start like thinking, like, dude, what's actually important to me? So, how old were you again?
17.
17.
Mhm.
Dude, I can't even imagine like your heart. Like, just what is going on? Can you just talk about it just for a little bit? I know we're like on a different subject, but like what
Sure.
vibration of everybody so close?
So one thing that's really interesting is I actually don't have a lot of memory of 9/11. So if you know anything about trauma or anything like that, and I know you definitely know a lot about trauma or have survived a lot of trauma, Sabrina. Um, Sometimes our brain actually blocks us from remembering a lot, and I will share some of the memories that I've had, but I just want to presence that because sometimes it doesn't feel safe for us to remember. So there can be parts of that that we don't remember, and so I have like all these like major details that are like kind of like blacked out in my mind. Like I don't know how, and I honestly for a long time didn't even think that I had PTSD or any of those sort of things, and it wasn't until I worked. So fast forward maybe like 10, 15 years, I was working as a chef in New York City. One of the restaurants that I helped service was the cafe at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. And I had a break in between teams that I was training. One of the managers suggested, "Oh, why don't you go down and look at the exhibits?" And so I am at work thinking like I'm just going to take a quick break and go like walk through the exhibit and like see stuff. Right? I literally, as I was getting down there, I could feel like my heart um, just beating faster. Like I can feel it right now. Like my throat starting to close. Like it was harder for me to talk. Um, my pulse quickened. Like, and it harkened me back to that day, right? Because again, the memorial in the museum is there to help us remember what happened, right? So here I am, like seeing, the just the like the pictures of like everything covered in white, right? And all these things that I had dissociated from, all these things that I had not reminded, like I purposely like kind of blocked out of my brain, started flooding back. And it got to a place where I literally couldn't breathe. I had to I was like running out of the memorial because I couldn't breathe anymore. And so what I remember about that day is not that much, like I was saying. And part of that has to do with like a really strong ability to dissociate. So I have a deadly peanut allergy. And I learned at a really young age when stressful things or life threatening things happen, how to, it seemed to me at the time, how to calm down. But what I really was learning how to do was like detach from my feelings, to not feel anything, right? To step outside of my body and almost become like this logical zombie who was pushing through or like getting wherever I needed to go, but not actually present. And and so like I've had experiences like that walking through that kind of made me realize like, whoa, there's like deeper shit here that I'm like not even processing. Something is wrong. Like this is not a normal way that somebody walks through the museum and feels. And so that kind of led me down this path of really looking at and understanding trauma on a different level.
Wow.
But yeah, it was surreal. Like I remember one moment I do remember. So we were evacuating, right? Which that day like also really taught me, when we talk about the shittiness, it taught me how like my teachers were just as clueless as I was, right? Like they had no idea what was going on. Nobody had any idea what was going on. And I think that was what was so scary, was this like lack of knowledge or lack of ability to control and like all those kind of things, right? I remember we were being evacuated. So we were like right on the ramp to walk out the doors. And as we were there, like, we had TVs working also, so we could like sort of see what was going on inside. And as the first tower fell, many people saw that on TV. We didn't just see it on TV. We saw our TV go out. We felt the ground beneath us shake. And then minutes later, they sent us out into that.
Wow.
And I was just like, I mean, I'm sure for them as adults, it was probably just as scary, and like they felt a sense of responsibility of like, is this the right thing to do for these kids, you know? But like, they basically sent us up the West Side Highway to walk, and it wasn't like they told us where to go. We were just like sent out, and as we walked out, the other thing that I remember is just seeing all these people who were also walking up the West Side Highway. So we weren't completely alone, although I couldn't find my friends or any of those things. We were walking up the West Side Highway, and there were all these people like covered in the ash, right? So they looked like ghosts walking,
Wow.
you know, just walking, right? And like we're walking right next to them, and I think it was, you know, like a little bit we'd walked already when we got to see the second tower fall. And I remember around then when we saw the second tower fall was when I realized that the date was 9/11. And I had this like sinking feeling in my stomach of like, oh my God, like we don't know what's going on. We don't know how bad this is. Like what does this mean? You know, like and all I could do was just like keep walking, right? Like and it seemed so like so stupid. I remember I was walking with a classmate, and like we weren't close, but every single year on 9/11 I text her or I like message her on Facebook Messenger, and I'm like, hey, just thinking of you today, because
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes, you know, sometimes the support that we're going to receive doesn't show up in the way that we wanted. Of course I wanted to be around friends or family or people I was close to, but like I do believe like God, spirit, the universe always sends some form of support our way. And I'm really glad that she was with me. You know, we walked all the way up to 23rd Street. I think we saw her dad. And then at some point we found out that the subways were open because they closed like all the bridges and the tunnels, and like there was no way out pretty much. Like you couldn't get around anywhere other than on foot. And eventually they opened it up. And I remember like getting home, seeing my parents, and it still felt surreal. Like I don't even know if, as much as I'd been worried about whether or not I'd see them again, I don't even remember if I hugged them. You know, like so there's these huge pockets of my memory that's like not there. And it's kind of crazy. Like
Wow.
I feel almost you know, people always say like never forget 9/11, and I'm like, what happens if it's hard to remember?
Mm. What do you think has been the real lesson for you regarding surviving 9/11?
I think that the thing that I carry the most and still carry to this day is that knowledge of like, I don't know how long I have left.
Mm.
And this idea, like, you know, this idea of what's shouldy in our life, like, am I doing stuff? Am I investing my limited time here on this earth in things that don't actually matter because they look good, or because I promised something to somebody and I don't want to let them down, or because whatever that is. And so a lot of times in my life, I check myself and I think like, okay, if this was my last day on earth, will I really be happy with how I spent my time? And for me, that kind of gets me out of making more shitty decisions on like what I think are supposed to be the right thing, and more into what I know in my heart. Like if I didn't have that long to live, that I at least can go to can rest, I guess, with peace.
Hmm.